There you
Thank you
are.
so much. I'm so happy to be with you all here today. I'll share my screen. So I just wanted to say first, thank you for Klaus for inviting me. Klaus has been an integral part of the REINS patient representative program. So it's great to be able to work with him to share a little bit about how REINS is thinking about engaging patients and caregivers in NF clinical trials. So just to start with one slide, a little bit just about the background and how we're thinking about, why it's so critically important to involve patients in health research. There's 4 arguments that I think are just really compelling taken together. And this slide is actually from Martin DeWitt, who is a researcher and also a patient with arthritis, who has really pioneered both being a patient participant and studying the science of how we can better engage patients in our research. And he helped share this slide, which talks about how, there's ethical reasons to involve patients in their care. Obviously, people have a right to have a say in things that affect them. And then content-wise, incorporating patients' lived experience really does make our outcomes more relevant, more feasible, and hopefully more meaningful in terms of finding new treatments that are really going to affect people's quality of life and day-to-day life. Politically, we think about too, I think that by involving patient communities, especially advocates, in our research, it can enhance some of the perceived legitimacy of our research and hopefully increase the chances that down the line, things we do research on will actually be implemented and taken up. And of course, also, I think there's something that's a beautiful relationship between patients and researchers that empowers both communities in a way that they might not have had experience or exposure to before, with patients learning more about research and getting to take an active role in shaping the research agenda, and researchers really getting to know more of the day-to-day concerns of patients and get to know them on a personal level and develop those relationships. So there's a little bit of background about REINS. REINS is an international group to improve clinical trials. REINS is an acronym. It stands for Response Evaluation in Neurofibromatosis and Schwannomatosis. It was established in 2011 by Dr. Scott Plotkin at Massachusetts General Hospital and Dr. Brigitte Wiedemann at the National Institutes of Health. They were the kind of co-founders. And the goal is really to develop standardized treatment response criteria for a variety of indications in NF1, NF2, and schwannomatosis. And by response criteria, I mean, what are the outcome measures we'll use in our clinical trial that will tell us whether this drug is actually having a beneficial effect or not? And what's the level that treatment has to reach to know that it's really benefiting patients and is worth perhaps any side effects or risks that come with that treatment? We really needed to start this kind of international collaboration because as a rare disease, we don't have the patient population to, run infinite numbers of trials. And so making sure that we get the best information we can from the trials we run and making sure those trials are comparable is really important. That way, I'm not using a different criteria than you're using, and we can't tell which drug, if my drug I studied and your drug you're studied, can't tell which one's better because we didn't use any of the same measures. By making this international consensus, we hope to help streamline kind of the trial development and make everything comparable. So really, we focus on proactively discussing and even developing new endpoints with all the relevant stakeholder groups, including the FDA and the EMA who approve drugs, researchers, pharmaceutical companies, and of course now patients and their caregivers. So REINS is structured in currently 8 working groups that are each focused on different topics that apply to NF. Some of them span all types of NF, like tumor imaging and thinking about how we're going to best capture growth in tumors, or functional outcomes, which would be things like breathing or walking or seeing, things that you do. I help lead patient-reported outcomes, which is like the surveys that you might fill out, like the quality of life surveys or pain reports. Rating your pain on a scale of 1 to 10, that's an example of a pretty, a one-item patient-reported outcome measure, and a variety of other topics. We're actually really excited to hopefully be starting a gene therapy specific group soon. We have over 160 active members. I'd actually put that at maybe over 200 at this point, although not everyone is equally involved time-wise. And it's international. This slide is probably a little bit out of date in terms of where in Europe we have people in Australia joining from us, but it is definitely open to everyone. And so just as a kind of a graphic of how REINS works, as I mentioned, we are separated into working groups. Each working group meets on its own, typically monthly, virtually over Zoom. We've been doing that since before the pandemic because we have such a wide range of people across different countries and time zones. And so each working group meets to develop recommendations in its topic area. And then twice a year, the entire REINS group will meet biannually. It used to be in person before COVID. Once in the summer, usually in tandem with the Children's Tumor Foundation NF Research Conference, and once in the winter, usually held in the Washington, D.C. area so that we can engage our FDA colleagues and other government regulatory agencies, at least traditionally. These are now, and actually will always, I think, be hybrid meetings, which some people in the future might be in person and some people might be online because we want to be inclusive of people who can't travel. And then every 3 to 4 years, we collect all of the recommendations that first the working groups had started, and then the full REINS group has kind of discussed and approved. And we publish that in an academic journal called Neurology so that they are open access, free to everyone, and any researcher across the world can see what we've recommended and use that data. So just to give a little sense of the topic of things that we've worked on so far, you can see across different categories, things that we've made recommendations on, and they're pretty wide ranging, including, how do you measure cutaneous neurofibromas? How can you best measure muscle strength or lung function? How do you measure pain and quality of life? And the neurocognitive group has done some work on attention and social skills, which are important in NF1. So you can see it's a very wide-ranging collaboration in terms of our topics. And we've been thinking about how do we incorporate patient input into clinical trial design in 2 ways. The biggest way, which I'll talk to you about the most today, is our patient representative program. And we recently published a paper evaluating how the first couple years of this program has been going. And also REINS does do some research surveys trying to collect kind of broad input about people's preferences for clinical trials or how they think about their a disease. And we've done one of these already on surveying adults with NF1 with cutaneous neurofibromas. And I think there was a recent survey of adolescents as well and parents to ask about how they think about their cutaneous neurofibromas or their skin tumors and what kind of aspects of the skin tumors they were hoping to treat in clinical trials. And we also did a survey about psychosocial clinical trials, so things treating depression, anxiety, stress, and what people think about that. So that's kind of the 2 ways that we're hoping to get both broad input by surveying anyone and everyone, and then patient representatives who are actually going to be part of the REINS collaboration and join with us. And so we actually engage patients at kind of 3 levels in REINS. Here at I actually think I have a laser pointer. Here's kind of our biggest group of patient representatives who serve in, we have our own patient representative working group, which I helped lead. We currently have 67 members. And really the idea is that we'll have a monthly working group that will meet with these many patient representatives who are interested so that we can get really diverse viewpoints and give kind of ad hoc targeted feedback to different groups. So we'll have different people come present at the monthly meeting and we'll give feedback on those clinical trials or research studies. So it's more of oftentimes a one-time thing. Someone comes to present, but we can give that kind of targeted feedback from a large body of people. All of the patient representatives are also welcome to serve on the other REINS working groups. So as I mentioned, we have 7 other working groups focused on different topics. The hope was to have at least kind of 3 people who would volunteer to join these working groups based on their own interests. And that way they could have more involved feedback. This is a bigger time commitment over, years oftentimes, to really dive deep on a specific topic that interests people. And this way we can get more sustained engagement across project life cycles. And then at the very top level, we actually even have 3 patient representatives who serve on the REINS Leadership Council, which is kind of like the overarching governing body, you can call it, of REINS, where we kind of do higher level planning about the annual meetings and topics that we'd like to pursue. And that way patients can also be involved in this kind of bird's eye view of REINS. So this is how currently our REINS patient representative working group is structured. I'm the co-chair, and Andrea Gross actually at the NIH was up until recently my researcher co-chair, although she has stepped down so that she could take leadership of another REINS group. And we have 2 patient representative co-chairs, including Klaus and Andres Lessing, who've been a pleasure to work with. And then thinking about our contributions, I kind of have sorted them out to scientific. So our role in giving feedback and working on other REINS working groups, as well as giving ad hoc design input on clinical trials. And just newly started, we have a patient representative who's heading up our dissemination committee, who's really going to lead the focus on trying to take the recommendations that we've made in academic journals and translating that into website content and, easier summaries that anyone can access and read to make sure our work is accessible to the larger body of people who might be interested in reading it. And then on the operations side, we have a recruitment subcommittee led by another patient representative to recruit new people to REINS. We have an education subcommittee co-chaired by Tracy Ann Rose at the Children's Tumor Foundation to make sure that whatever training materials or education materials people need, we can make available. And then evaluation committee, which I lead, to make sure that we're always continuously improving the program, taking feedback, and hopefully trying to iterate this to always be a better experience and more helpful for people. So in terms of what REINS patient representatives actually do, the kind of base expectation is that people will come to the monthly patient representative meeting as much as they can. It's a 1-hour virtual meeting with live captioning. We always have captions where people give feedback on clinical trial endpoints, talk about how we want to tweak the program and improve it, and give input on overarching REINS goals. We currently alternate our meetings, and we have one that is Wednesday evenings Eastern time, 7 to 8 in Eastern time in the US. And then the other, on other months, we alternate with meeting on Saturdays at 1 p.m. We actually have our next meeting today at 1 p.m. Eastern time as a way to try and make our meetings accessible to people across a variety of time zones. We always actually record our meetings now and put them on a private YouTube channel so that for people who can't make those times, they can review the meeting and still send their feedback via email. It's not a perfect system, but it's the best kind of that we've figured out so far to involve people over, such a variety of places. REINS patient representatives are also invited to our biannual conferences. These are generally either an afternoon or a full day meetings that we hold once a year with both in-person and virtual options. Typically, our summer meeting is where we just kind of review what each of the working groups has been working on so we can discuss and give feedback. And in the winter, we generally do a special theme. For instance, the one we're going to be doing this winter will be focused on gene therapy, and that's coming up in late winter, I think February or March. And then optionally, people can participate in other REINS working groups depending on their interests and availability. This is definitely something that we've worked hard to try to refine, although we're still always looking for room for improvement. And so I wanted to give a little bit of the history of how we've kind of tweaked this program. The program actually started in 2000, I think the winter of 2017, I believe, or 2018. And By about a year or two in, we realized that there were definitely, what we had piloted could use improvements, and we administered a formal survey of our members to try and get feedback on what was working and what to improve. We presented those findings at the December 2019 meeting. We actually all did group brainstorming through some structured exercises to generate kind of ideas about what we wanted to change. The evaluation sub-team of patient representatives and a few researchers turned those into kind of action items, and wrote up the manuscript I mentioned to publish our findings. And then we planned a new round of recruitment where we recruited new patients to REINS. Part of what we have changed recently is that we made our online application much simpler. We just collect basically mostly demographic data just so that we can monitor, are we doing a good job reaching different groups of NF patients, not because we're going to judge you on the application. So it's more just for record keeping for us. We wrote up a formal role description of what patient representatives do so that people would have a little bit more of a sense of what they were signing up for. And we have an introductory webinar on YouTube, which actually is public and anyone can watch, just to give a little bit of more information and hopefully an engaging way. We ran this recruitment in early January and February of 2021 was our last kind of defined round of recruitment. And we got 51 new applicants who started joining our meetings in March. And so that's been going great. I think it's 7-8 months now. No, more than 10 months probably. And so we've been having a great time. And just to give you a sense of who participates in REINS, it is predominantly US patient representatives at the moment. 85% of people are from the US, but 15% of people are from various locations across Canada and Europe. In terms of types of representatives, we're about 50-50 split between people who have NF themselves and people who are a family member, a parent, or caregiver of someone with NF. We do have a lot of people representing NF1, about 3/4 of our group right now, although we would love to have more NF2 and Schwannomatosis members as well. We are working to improve the racial and ethnic diversity of our membership. As you can see, it's about 88% white. And we also do have a lot more female volunteers than males. We're about 75%, so 3/4 female. So if you're a man with NF who's interested in joining, we'd love to have you, just to make sure we're including everyone. And we worked really hard to improve the educational diversity. So in our first round of cohorts, we had 30 people who had joined REINS, and a lot of them had master's degrees or other kind of advanced professional degrees. And we really wanted to make it clear that you do not have to have a science background to be in REINS. You don't have to have graduated from college. We really want to know mostly about your experience as a patient with NF and using that to improve research. So I do feel glad that we've vastly increased the number of people who had not graduated from college in our community. As part of this recruitment, we have educational training materials, which are available on our website for free. If you want to take a look, we've definitely used some of the information. I know Klaus had mentioned UPATI and other European initiatives for training patients. So we have some links to their information, as well as links to other information about REINS, clinical trials, and NF programs, if you want to check it out. And then, so as we onboarded this new cohort of patient representatives, we asked everyone sort of, well, what do you hope to accomplish being here? And you can see this word cloud was what everyone said. And some of these biggest items here were really to contribute, to make a contribution, and actually, help contribute to research, collaborate with others, give back to the community. And I think that's what we're really striving to do. Just to reiterate that point from one of our early surveys, we asked that first cohort of 30 people why they had joined, and the answers really coalesced into 3 categories: to advocate for the community, to contribute to research, and to represent other NF patients and represent the community. And so 100% people have been able to do this. This was the result of our findings in our evaluation survey, that by engaging patients in clinical trials, really we can access this unique perspective patients have, which might sound obvious. Of course, it's a unique perspective compared to clinicians and researchers. So by having people share both their personal experience and, reflect on other patients' experiences that they've met or know about, it really contributes both directly to research tasks, and our representatives have done things like help determine the research focus, reviewing existing outcome measures, giving input on study design to decide on new outcome measures, analyzing data and disseminating findings. But it also indirectly helps and helps clinicians and researchers understand patients' concerns, kind of step back, see the bigger picture, the whole person beyond just maybe their specialty of medicine or their particular research focus, and really work across disciplines and communicate with each other more clearly, which has been great. And in terms of the impact that's had, obviously this is kind of subjective. It's what people reported in the survey, but all of the respondents, patient reps, researchers, clinicians said that they think that because of this patient engagement in research, that the outcome measures and domains we're picking for clinical trials are going to be more relevant to people's concerns, more feasible to implement so that the trials actually work, and less burdensome, hopefully, on patients to actually do and complete if you are volunteering to serve in a clinical trial. And then thinking about our new model, where we have people come give presentations at our monthly meeting, you can see we've given feedback on a wide variety of projects. Here are projects to do with selecting clinical outcome measures or understanding people's preferences for clinical trials. This has included a rating scale to assess whether tumors are we called it disfigurement, but really how they're affecting people's appearance, and being able to measure that over time, if a tumor shrinks, that you feel better about your appearance. Also looking at communication difficulties and sleep issues and how we might measure those in clinical trials. We've actually given feedback on a number of clinical trial proposals themselves. In NF1, we've talked about trials recently for plexiform neurofibromas, for MPNST or malignant peripheral nerve sheath tumors, atypical neurofibromas, and then also a prospective study looking at how MEK inhibitors like selumetinib, which is currently approved for NF1, what that drug could maybe be affecting in other symptoms like bone for people. In NF2, I actually presented a study which was funded to add interviews with patients to an existing NF2 clinical trial so that we can better understand patients' experiences and how they're thinking about quality of life and treatment benefit. And also Schwannomatosis. We recently presented about a platform trial that's seeking funding right now to treat schwannomatosis-related pain, and a platform trial being one that's going to hopefully potentially test multiple drugs with the same people, giving people access to a lot of different options. So that's really exciting. And then this last category, we've only had one talk, I would say, that falls into this, but this very kind of vision setting presentation, trying to give input on things that aren't currently ready for research, but we're thinking ahead to gene therapy, to things like vision restoration or vision preservation therapies, and trying to get input really early from patients about what's important to think about in these areas. So not a specific study, but an area of future study that people are hoping to dig deep into. And then I also wanted to share this. We definitely strive within REINS to create an atmosphere that's conducive to people contributing. This was another word cloud from our onboarding event with our new patient reps. And we asked what the most important values are for a program that's going to engage patients. And you could see these are things that we are working on and always trying to get better at, but being accessible and inclusive and respectful in our communications and collaborating transparently are all these ideas that we're trying to live up to in REINS, to really include everyone and make sure everyone's contribution is heard. Let's see here. So our next steps that we're currently tackling, as I mentioned, for the dissemination committee, we're writing these kind of, You can call them plain English summaries. Some people call them lay abstracts, but basically more summaries of all the publications and recommendations REINS has already made to make it easily accessible for other researchers and for patients and their family members to read and see about. We'll continue to update the educational and training materials on the REINS website, which will also be open to anyone, not just people who are in REINS, if you're interested in checking them out. And we're hopefully going to get a best practices handbook in terms of developing new models, just to make sure that that we're living up to, as I said, those ideals of being inclusive and respectful, and helping people figure out the best way to engage patients so that it is respectful of people's time and also really maximizes the value of their participation. So I highly encourage you, if you're interested, please visit the REINS website to learn more. It's copied here, and maybe I can also put it in the chat in a second. If you search like REINS, I think search REINS collaboration and then like NIH or NCI, because it's the NIH hosts our website. But on here, you can see more information about the different working groups, copies of presentations that we've made, so PowerPoint slides from other presentations about what we've been working on, and all of our publications are free to access. And if you are interested in joining REINS, we always accept new members on an ad hoc basis, in addition to these recruitment rounds that I mentioned, where we're really actively looking for members to kind of diversify our cohort. We also do accept now anyone who is interested can apply. You can email me directly and I will send you the information. All that's required if you want to join REINS is that you fill out a very brief online application. As I mentioned, it's mostly just so we know about you and can make sure, keep tabs on who's participating, not because we're going to reject your application or, judge it. So it's just a brief way for us to get information on you. We'll match you with a current patient representative to serve as kind of a mentor. That way, if you have questions as you're onboarding, you have kind of a point person you can talk to. And I will send you some brief training materials just so you can review at your leisure to get oriented, a copy of that video that we have and some other written materials just to help catch you up. And then you can immediately start participating in our monthly meeting. So definitely, if anyone is interested, please let me know. We would love to have new members, especially people in Europe and other places, to help make sure we're representing everyone's perspectives.